Premier Alison Redford used taxpayer money inappropriately. She spent your cash for personal and partisan purposes, and there's a lot more to tell you about from today's Auditor General report. Here's just a quick look. The Auditor General concludes that Redford and her office used public resources inappropriately. She used government planes for personal benefit. She made the decisions on the so-called Sky Palace penthouse suite planned for the publicly owned federal building, and that Redford and her office often violated expense policies. Kim Trinacity has the details on this.
In his quiet, understated manner, Alberta's Auditor General ripped the lid off the shadowy world of unfettered use of taxpayers' money by former Premier Alison Redford and her staff. In the report, he wrote, "How could this have happened? The answer is the aura of power around Premier Redford."
Others who had to interact with the Premier and her office, I think they felt in some way I mean, it's a word that I haven't rehearsed. I'm trying to answer your question as best as I can, sort of trapped in this. After all, the Premier is the Premier.
As previously reported by CBC News, there was abuse of government aircraft. Block booking of phony passenger lists to allow the Premier to fly alone. The Premier taking her daughter and on 4 occasions her daughter's friends on personal trips. Twice the Premier's daughter flew alone. Cabinet ministers and MLAs used the planes to attend PC party fundraisers. Finance Minister Doug Horner was responsible for the government fleet of planes. He says he didn't know about Redford's personal use.
If I didn't know, I couldn't step in to stop.
And there's been only partial reporting of international travel costs. According to the Auditor General, the real cost of Redford's trip to India and Davos, Switzerland was roughly $450,000, not $131,000 as the government reported.
If there had been oversight, arguably the failings that are chronicled in this report might have been prevented or detected earlier. And I mean oversight with the capacity to challenge substantively.
And the so-called Sky Palace, the redesign of the top floor of a public building for a Premier's residence. Astonishingly, according to the Auditor General, the full cost has not been calculated, and it's still being built as a residence with bathrooms and showers.
In short, what is now being built on the 11th floor is a residential suite that will have meeting room rather than bedroom furniture.
During the investigation, auditors interviewed the former Premier, who they say never took any personal responsibility for the inappropriate use of taxpayers' dollars. While Redford did repay some costs for personal travel, the Auditor General says it wasn't enough to fully cover it all. The Auditor General concluded his report with an overriding recommendation of the need for oversight of spending in the Premier's office, no matter who it is. Kim Trinacity, CBC News, Edmonton.
So we have a report condemning the Premier and her office for wasting taxpayer dollars, a possible RCMP investigation, and a governing party in shambles. Alberta's opposition parties say all of this should change voters' minds. Marion Warnick has been following that part of the story for us tonight. Marion, now there are calls for another resignation.
That's right. The official opposition is calling for the person in charge of spending to step down, while others say there needs to be even more investigation. Hard to say what was more harsh today, the findings in the Auditor General's report or the comments about it.
This culture of entitlement runs much deeper than just with former Premier Alison Redford.
See, they have gone on to violate public trust in every form.
And the most scathing from Alberta's official opposition.
This report, all 44 pages, tells the story of an entire government completely off the rails.
All 3 opposition parties rightly pointed out that the report's findings about the misuse of funds are not limited only to the actions of former Premier Alison Redford. But while the Auditor General says she was ultimately responsible for breaking the rules, they aren't buying it.
And this implicates several cabinet ministers.
You can't blame Premier Redford alone here. There are many other ministries that are involved.
Many political watchers agree.
You either had to be like completely clueless, or you had to be turning a blind eye. But it really seems that the problems were sort of extensive enough that PCMLAs are going to have to answer to their constituents as to why they didn't call this stuff out, why they were willfully blind to this.
Both the NDP and the Liberals are calling for a full public inquiry The Wild Rose called first and loudest for another resignation letter, this time from Finance Minister Doug Horner.
Minister Horner is responsible for all government spending, including the prudent and proper use of government aircraft. Albertans should not have to endure one more day of this minister's shocking incompetence.
Finance Minister Horner has brushed off those accusations and those calls for him to step down, and he tells us now that he's going to work hard on implementing the Auditor General's recommendations at this point.
All right, we shall see. Thanks for that, Marion.
You're welcome.
Well, the PC party, of course, is in the middle of a leadership race. Frontrunner Jim Prentice posted on Facebook that nobody is above the law and that the province needs to return to good government. And the other two candidates, who were both ministers in the Redford government, were eager to distance themselves from the former premier.
You know, I've been the first one to call the office on it. I've been the first one to say that we need an independent investigation. I'm the first one to say that we need prosecution if any wrongdoing was done. And at the end of the day, Albertans must know.
But the other point here is it never should have happened. And I think Albertans deserve better in the future. If I become premier, I will give them better in the future. We cannot allow a blurry line between government business and party business.
But what do the people who matter most have to say about today's report from the Auditor General? We talked to voters to ask what they think about what we learned today.
I think that's crazy. That's unacceptable. For our money to go to something meaningless like that compared to helping the people out, it's sad.
She's definitely not alone. You cannot do this alone. I mean, not necessarily other people who abuse government services like that, but people knew inside the party well in advance, and they didn't do anything. So.
I don't think that her behavior is entirely reflective of the representatives that we have in Alberta legislature. At least I hope it's not, and I hope that other representatives behave with more integrity than she has.
We have an extensive story, including a link to the full Auditor General report on our website. We also have a timeline of Alison Redford's political career and her fall from power.